In this movie, we'll talk about stacking order, which is quite simply the order in which individual objects and entire layers are stacked from the back of your illustration all the way to the front. So let's say my text layer is selected, which is currently at the top of the stack, and I decide to switch to the blob brush, which if you went ahead and customize your shortcuts along with me back in chapter 11 of the fundamentals course, has a shortcut of B for brush. All right, so I've made my cursor pretty big by pressing the right bracket key a few times. And now let's say I just decide to paint a random brush stroke and it appears in black. All right, now I'm going to switch to a different color. Let's say this shade of green right here. Doesn't really matter. Press the Enter key and then I'll paint a new brush stroke. And notice the new one appears in front of the old one. So every time you draw something in Illustrator, it's appearing at the top of the stack. But that doesn't mean it's the top object in your entire document. And so this time I'm going to switch to yellow, let's say, and now I'll draw a really big brush stroke like so, and it appears in front of the text because I'm working on the text layer. Compare that to what happens if I go ahead and undo that brush stroke and I instead switch to the head layer right here, and I again paint my brush stroke. It looks like I'm painting over the text, but as soon as I release, it goes behind the text. And that's because you're always working within the confines of the active layer. And so now if I were to switch to, let's say, the shade of purple right here, and then paint yet another brush stroke, it's going to initially, as I'm painting it, appear to be at the very front of the document. But as soon as I release, it resolves as being at the top of the active layer. So in other words, in front of the yellow brush stroke, but in back of the text. You can, however, change the stacking order anytime you like by pressing the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool up here at the top of the toolbox, and then select the object that you want to send backward or forward, and right-click anywhere inside the document window. You don't have to right-click on the object itself. Then drop down to Arrange, and notice that you have these various options to work with, starting with Bring to Front and ending with Send to Back. So let's say I choose Bring to Front. That's going to bring the object to the front of the active layer. So it's not going to move it from the head layer to any other layer. If I wanted that to happen, I would have to do so manually by dragging that little square up or down the stack like so. Of course, that's not what I want, so I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo that change. The thing you really want to know about Bring to Front and Send to Back, besides their, I think, fairly obvious meanings, if I go ahead and choose Send to Back, I will send this object to the back of the active layer, which is too far back, as you can see right here, because I've moved his face back behind this little edge right there. So what I'd need to do is right-click once again anywhere inside the document window, choose Arrange, and choose Bring Forward in order to nudge that guy forward. That is, not to the front of the stack, but just one object forward inside this layer. Now, a lot of folks will caution you, you know what, you don't ever want to use those options. Instead, what you want to do is do a cut, followed by either a paste in front or a paste in back, because that way you're changing the stacking order relative to the existing document. And so I might do that. I'll go ahead and choose Cut, or you can press Control-X or Command-X on the Mac. And then I might click on an object that obviously the face needs to be behind, and then I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose Paste in Back, or I can press Control-B or Command-B on the Mac. But that doesn't really do the trick for us. That puts things in the wrong location. And my experience over time has been the more complicated your document becomes, the less you can afford to rely on paste in front and paste in back, which is why these relative options here, right-click, Arrange, Bring Forward, and Send Backward, have their own keyboard shortcuts that I really urge you to memorize. They're Control or Command, depending on your platform, and one of the square bracket keys. And these are the keys just to the right of the P as in Paul key on an American keyboard. So Control right bracket is going to bring the object forward. Control left bracket, that would be Command left bracket on the Mac, is going to send it backward. Again, one object. If you want to send it all the way back, and all I'm doing, by the way, is repeating the keyboard shortcuts that you can see for yourself inside of this submenu. But if you want to send things all the way to the back, you would press Control-Shift left bracket. That's Command-Shift left bracket on the Mac to send it all the way forward. Press Control-Shift or Command-Shift right bracket. Now, I've really messed things up, of course, so what I'm going to do is send it all the way back, which is Control or Command-Shift left bracket, and then I'm going to nudge it forward, just one object, by pressing Control or Command right bracket, and that ends up being the proper location for this specific object. All right, you can also adjust the stacking order of entire layers, and you do that just by dragging and dropping layers here inside the Layers panel. So notice if I drag the body layer in front of the head layer, I get this effect here. I could drag the aura layer all the way up, so it's covering up these two layers. You can also move multiple layers at a time. So let's say I want to grab both the body layer and the head layer. I'd click on one, shift-click on the other, and then drag them and drop them above the aura layer. A couple of things to be careful about. Obviously, at this point, I need the head layer to be in front of the body layer. But notice what happens if I drag it and then drop it in the middle. I will go ahead and drop the head layer inside the body layer, at which point, notice it disappeared. I have to twirl open the body layer to find the head layer, which is now a sublayer inside the body layer. Now, I'm not a big fan of sublayers. I think you're better off working inside groups if you're looking for yet another container inside of a layer. And one of the big reasons is, notice how I've gone and messed up the coloring of all the objects inside the body layer. They are now gold like the head layer, which is not what I want. So I'm just going to drag this head layer and drop it out in between the text and body layers. And now it exists as a separate layer in a proper stacking order inside this illustration. The color of the objects inside the body layer is still messed up, and you can fix that by twirling close that body layer and then twirling it back open, at which point everything should look correct again. All right, another thing to bear in mind is that layers span artboards inside of Illustrator. So if I go ahead and switch over to this document, notice that I've changed the coloring scheme of that Wizard of Oz excerpt from Chapter 8 of the Fundamentals course. And I've also added some coloring inside the Scarecrow that exists on this green layer right here. Now, obviously, if I accidentally drag and drop this guy above the Tin Man layer, I'm going to notice that, and I'm going to think, okay, that was wrong. So I'll just grab the Tin Man layer and put him on top of the green layer, and everything's the way it should be. Well, this document contains multiple artboards, and so if I were to press Shift Page down in order to advance to the second artboard, everything's going to look fine. But if I press Shift Page down again, I'm going to see that my green fill now exists in front of the Scarecrow. And of course, the solution in that case is to grab the Scarecrow layer and drag it and drop it above the green layer like so. And that, friends, is my whirlwind tour of everything related to stacking order, whether we're talking about objects inside of a layer or entire layers with respect to each other here inside Illustrator.